Okay, so while China is struggling to decide to call on some allies, this being North Korea and Mongolia, which leads to South Korea and Japan declaring war onto North Korea and China. Um, Over in the Middle East, China decides to call on Iran, which causes Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Yemen, and Armenia to join in, as well as Lebanon, because Azerbaijan, Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Qatar, Turkey, and Kuwait all joined, and Georgia. I'm pretty sure I said that twice. So now we're trying having another massive front. They can get some stuff done. But first, Yemen is swiftly conquered due to Oman and Saudi Arabia's massive strength over what's basically just a dying country that's just flooded with terrorism, and it's awful and just blah. Um. Then right away, the borders decide to be split between Saudi Arabia and Oman. And Oman gets most of it. Over in the UAE, they try to launch multiple invasions into Iran, but it doesn't go too well. With Persian support, Iraq Iraq is able to start not that big of a push, but a small push into Saudi Arabia and takes out Kuwait. Um, they also fortify along here. Because this whole thing is happening, Palestine decides to try to join in, but they knew this would eventually lead to Israel also joining in on the side of the blue team. So Israel starts fortifying, and Palestine is kind of screwed here. Palestine is very quickly taken out by the very powerful Israel, and Israel starts pushing into Jordan. Um, they also decide to take out Lebanon from the north, and China's allies seem to have been failing them. Um, with their military power, Israel launches an all-out assault over into Persia and takes part of Syria. They also start taking over. They take over the rest of the lands that the rest of the country's land that was left, and they're able to eventually wipe out Syria with Turkish help. Um, so now the push into Iraq has started with a massive encirclement, capturing their capital. Wow. And Saudi Arabia is able to finish them off. Now the only threat is Iran and Armenia, but Armenia, with mainly Turkish and Azerbaijan troops, march in and take over the country very easily. Jeez. Um, After the full capitulation, they decided just to connect it. They decided just to give all of Armenia to Azerbaijan because Georgia doesn't really care that much, although they do have a massive sphere of influence. Back over in the Middle East, the borders are also going to be settled over here. Um, Turkey gets a bit of an Ottoman Empire aesthetic. Um, Not that much. That kind of digs in a little to Saudi Arabia. So they get around this. So they get around this land while Israel is able to capture a lot of this, which also pushes into Saudi Arabia for God's sake. So yeah, Israel is able to capture a massive amount of land. Now Cyprus is staying neutral because they know they can't really defeat Turkey. So now with a massive coalition, India and their allies decide to push into Persia. Persia's getting pretty worried right now, so they decide to try to do anything to demoralize them. They try making multiple landings over in the UAE. All of them fail, and the allies start closing in from all sides. Azerbaijan and Turkey start to push in from the north, while Saudi Arabia starts pushing in from the southwest. This leads to a massive push through and causes Iran to lose hope after the two fronts being connected, but they decide to keep fighting. Well, the few soldiers that are left decide to keep fighting, I should say, and until they are eventually fully capitulated. So now we have a lot of land being up for grasp, and it's eventually settled, as the Middle East doesn't really have any reason to be in this war, although they will stay in on help of India. India gets around half of Iran, while the UAE gets a little bit of territory. Qatar gets a little bit of territory. Turkey gets a lot of northern Iran. Um, and even though Azerbaijan mainly just put in support and they weren't Iraning, they were I walking. They get a little bit of land out of Iran as well. So now we have lots of borders being set up as the rest going to Saudi Arabia due to them being the main force that took them out. Um, India also decides to thank Oman by giving them some mild territory out of their own empire. So now with the Middle East being settled, they can finally return their attention over to China, who's been able to start making pushbacks due to India being distracted in the Middle East. Tibet is encircled and India has been pushed into, and we're about to have a second battle in New Delhi as China takes more and more of their encircled territory. They eventually completely encircle New Delhi and it's captured, and two more encirclements happen right here after the successful spearheads. They then connect their front and they start their massive push into India. Now India's getting a bit worried as Vietnam is also starting to fail a little bit. But let's go over to the Korean Peninsula for now. So this is going to be a bit more detailed in the fights. So we have North Korea instantly starting to push down South Korea because this is a surprise attack. Keep in mind all these things have been kind of happening simultaneously, but Seoul is eventually circled, and now we have the battle for Seoul. It's recognized as one of the most bloody battles of the war. Except for the battle in New Delhi being the only one to jump it for now at least. Seoul keeps getting circled in until South Korea eventually makes a push forward with mainly Japanese troops. The Japanese start to encircle the North Korean forces until they have to escape by sea and flee to China. Then try to get them back into North Korea, but they decide to stay because literally anywhere is better than North Korea at this point. And South Korea and Japan start making their push into North Korea. Russia's starting to get worried that they may just keep going, so they signed a peace treaty with Russia, even though they're not in the war. South Korea and Japan do, to tell them that, hey, we're not gonna keep going, okay? So now North Korea, China's kind of just leaving it to them because they're hoping that they can defeat India before North Korea eventually falls. North Korea gets every single citizen, no matter the age. They mainly with around 12 to 40-year-olds to just all be meant for the war, which goes obviously horribly because there's literally 80-year-old men fighting if they can barely even make it to that age due to the starvation. Pyongyang is captured and Kim Jong Un escapes over to Russia, knowing it's a neutral country. There is also a border skirmish in Russia with Japan getting a little bit of this, but it's not really a war. Russian troops. The way this happened was Russian troops mistakenly believing war broken out between Japan and Russia, and Japan eventually gets a little bit of claims out of this one island. Now we have the Japanese going on it decide to hatch a plan with the rest of the allies. Okay, I got a great idea. Let's attack around here, and everyone just goes, no, do not. Japan doesn't care. They do it. So now Japan sends in a massive force to take Nanking, and I think you can see where this is going. They push through and don't question it. So now with Japan taking over the city and pretty brutally too. Jesus, why Japan? Just why? They start fortifying until they're eventually pushed out by China. The Allies decide to kick Japan out of their group, so now Japan's just kind of rogue at this point. But they're only going to be fighting China.